Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today we're going to discuss something that is completely at odds with what we discussed yesterday, which I realise is going to seem a bit weird, but just bear with me. So, over the last the last week and a half or so, there's been a lot of stuff about the Dark Eldar, the Drukhari, and the previews that we've had for their codex, which, frankly, having caught up on it now, just looks just beyond amazing. It's so fluffy and it's so well thought out, and there is no part of it where I looked at it and went, I looked at pretty much everything about it, and even things that didn't seem hugely useful still had such a good amount of flavour to it. You know, it related to the Drukhari so well that even things that didn't seem as useful in just a general sense as perhaps other stratagems or other tactics or other traits, I still kind of looked at it and went, I'm seeing that before, but just the way that's phrased, it seems more Dark Eldar. Like, just the way it's been presented feels more appropriate for the faction. What you're going to see during this video, by the way, I'll just drop this in now before we get too far into it. I will go through the Dark Eldar stuff in detail at some point. It'll probably be sometime in the next couple of days. It won't be today because I need to go through all 2,000 entries for the competition. Jesus Christ, wish me luck. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a few, there'll be some rotating images in the video, probably down here, yeah, probably down there, just showing a few of the strategies and stuff, and showing the other subject that is going to be kind of the example as to why I think actually Games Workshop are genuinely turning a big corner when it comes to dealing with the non-favoured races, let's put it like that, because the Dark Eldar stuff looked great, and I keep wanting to say Dark Eldar instead of Drukhari. I'll just interchange between the two, you know what I mean. But there's also this stuff for Age of Sigmar, the Idoneth Deepkin, which, as I've said before, I'm not an Age of Sigmar person, I'm not a Warhammer Fantasy person, it's just something that passed me by completely. And I have to admit that I have looked at the Age of Sigmar range quite a bit. Not just recently, over quite a significant period of time. I kind of wondered whether to give it a try, whether to commit to buying a few models. And the Deepkin stuff is so unbelievably mental. It's so good. I've seen a few people who think it's a bit too wacky, a bit too out there, but to me that is what makes it so exceptionally interesting to me. This is stuff that I would not expect to see from Games Workshop. Not even just a few years ago, but to be honest, right around now it still seems kind of out there. It still seems out of left field. When you look at let's face it, the very safe bet of the Stormcast Eternals, the Deepkin are at the opposite end of that, right? So the Stormcast Eternals, they are Space Marines in Warhammer Fantasy. That's what they are. It's not particularly original, it's not hugely interesting, at least to me. I quite like the model designs, but the scale of them kind of made the scale of Age of Sigmar a bit weird, and I still don't really understand how the models relate to each other. I mean, I've used this guy as an example many times, but that's a Khorne Slaughter Priest, and he's massive, he's bigger than a Primaris Marine. Scaling in Age of Sigmar is now a total source of bafflement for me. I've got no clue what the actual scale is supposed to be. But I can't deny that the Stormcast Eternals at least don't look interesting. They look kind of cool. They look like proper, full-on, almost World of Warcraft fantasy knights. But they're not exactly a gamble. They're not exactly something that you would throw out there as a kind of as a passion project. I think that's fair to say. I think you obviously need to have a passion for what you're doing to create stuff, especially miniatures. When it comes to, creative processes, if you don't have an enthusiasm for it, it shows. So the design team behind the Stormcast Eternals obviously had a passion for doing it, but it's not a massive risk. Taking something as popular as Space Marines, taking something as well known as Space Marines, and making a fantasy version is not exactly up there in terms of, will this fail? Because the chances are it's not. And given how Age of Sigmar was received at launch, I would argue that it was proved not to be a particular gamble, because no matter how many people I saw say they hated Age of Sigmar and they hated that fantasy had been killed, I saw far more people buying Stormcast Eternals. You couldn't move for work in progress pictures of them all over the place. Compare that to the Deepkin, which are just so beyond weird. Deep sea elves, like flying turtles with 6 flippers, with chariots on top, people riding giant eels and things that look like, well, evil dolphins. I mean, there's a squid with a knife. Sorry, an octopus with a knife. You could not, tell me that was coming. Even though I'd heard the rumours that there were going to be new elves, that there was going to be, new stuff for the elves for Age of Sigmar. If you'd have said before the reveal, oh yeah, they're going to be deep sea elves, there's going to be an octopus with a knife, there's going to be a dude with a giant, fish fin helmet with a cloak made out of the ocean, I would genuinely have sat there and gone, no, there isn't, don't be stupid, that is never going to happen, that is way too out there. I mean, Daughters of Cain is one thing, but, they're established, and let's face it, the trope of elves in nothing but their underwear running around with knives, that's something that's never going to go away. That's something that, again, is popular enough to know that it's not really a risk, it's not really a gamble. These Deepkin models are so far beyond that. They're so mental, they're so out there, and they're exciting because of that, because this is a faction that is not... It's not Stormcast Eternals. It's not more Khorne Warriors. It's not the safe bets. It's not the 2 favoured factions for Age of Sigmar, the ones that seem to have gotten the most attention. And let's face it, they do seem to have gotten the most attention. The Khorne Bloodbound, or whatever they're called, and the Stormcast Eternals have had release upon release. To suddenly show up with something as batshit crazy as deep sea elves, that gives me a huge amount of confidence in Games Workshop and their treatment of the, as I say, lesser favoured races in the future. And it's that combined with just the sheer amount of effort and the sheer amount of thought and the, I guess, just how appropriate the Dark Eldar codex is. It's really persuading me that whilst we can sit here, and we do sit here a lot and say, oh look, more power armour, oh look, Games Workshop are doing more stuff for Space Marines, oh it's got to involve the Imperium again, I think it's easy to take that attitude and use it to ignore obvious signs of progress. Because to me, the Deepkin stuff is an obvious sign of progress. To me, the sheer quality of what I've seen for the Dark Eldar Codex so far, I mean, it speaks of actual development of these races, of these ideas. It speaks of actually getting the attention they deserve. Now, it's not to say that is blanket, that is uniform, that every single Xenos Codex is that good, because I think actually the Tau one has been kind of shown to be a little bit lackluster in comparison to Necron and Drukhari. I'm talking in terms of sheer fluff badassery. I'm talking about unique flavour more than anything. I feel like Necron and Drukhari both have got that well and above what the Tau Codex got. But still, those 2 releases, those 2 sort of elf-based things that have happened in the last few weeks are doing a lot to convince me that maybe we shouldn't be taking that cynical stand. Maybe we shouldn't be taking that approach of, oh well, it's Games Workshop, so if it's Imperium then it's going to get all the attention, nothing else will. I don't know if that's necessarily true anymore. And when you consider how big a release like the Deepkin is, I've seen a few people say things like, well, there's no new models for Dark Eldar. Where are the new models for the Xenos races? We got new models for Primaris, we got new models for Adeptus Custodes. Yeah, we did. But in a way, using the Primaris as an example of new models for kind of Space Marines, it's both fair and unfair, because the Primaris stuff can be used for everything. Pretty much every Space Marine chapter can use Primaris. So, although it's only a couple of boxes, I mean, it's not actually that bigger release. I know it feels like it. I know it seems like it, but you've got the intercessors, the aggressors, Inceptors, intercessors, Hellblasters, aggressors. You've got the Redemptor, and you've got the Repulsor on the Reavers. So that's like, I mean, there's like eight like boxes, and then there's a couple of characters. It's not a tiny release, but it's also not even close to the range that the Space Marines had at the time. It's not like it was a complete replacement. It was an update. And if you look at the Custody stuff, yeah, there's a load of different units, but half the kits are exactly the same. The Deepkin stuff is all new, it's all separate, it's all different. And the fact that they've invested that much time and that much effort and that much, I guess, that much actual money into something as bizarre as that gives me a genuine hope that we will see more stuff like that, not just for Age of Sigmar, but for Warhammer 40k as well. Now, so far, the 40k stuff in terms of the Xenos races, we haven't seen a huge amount of like new things. We've got a new crypt tech. Have we got anything else? I genuinely can't remember. We've got new start collecting boxes, which I think were needed in a couple of cases. And we haven't really had anything big in terms of model releases. But having made that video yesterday about the Orcs, about the need for the Orcs to have a proper replacement, to actually have something that brings their line together, that condenses their range so everything is up to date. Having made that video, and having then thought about just how much has gone into the Deepkin stuff, how much has gone into the Dark Eldar codex, I am actually now kind of hopeful, actually pretty optimistic, that we'll see full-on updates for the Orcs, that we'll see a full-on update for Eldar, that resin kits will be removed, that metal kits will be ditched, that we'll actually get some new sculpts, we'll get some new boxes. Because whilst it is very easy to go, oh, Games Workshop only cares about the Imperium, and whilst the Imperium do obviously get a significant amount of the focus, I don't think you can look at the kind of recent examples of the Dark Eldar and the Deepkin and still say that Games Workshop clearly don't give a shit about the other factions, about the other races. Because I don't think that's true. I think it was true. Don't get me wrong, I think there was a definite period in Games Workshop's history where essentially if it wasn't Space Marine stuff, it got shafted. But I don't think we're there anymore, and I think we're actually starting to see a genuine shift in the way that Games Workshop operates and the way that Games Workshop treats the, even though they're less popular, other races in both Age of Sigmar and in Warhammer 40k. I still think they're doing a good job. I think there's still missteps, and I think there's still things that you can pull Games Workshop up on. But if the Dark Eldar Codex and the Idoneth Deepkin stuff is anything to go by, I think actually the future is a lot brighter for the other races than perhaps we're giving them credit for. And really, I'm just hoping that having said all of that, I don't turn out to be wrong. I mean, we've got quite a while before the Sisters of Battle come out because they're 2019. I would hope to see some interesting and significant stuff before then for things like Orcs. I'd love to see updates for the Eldar because the poor lads have got so much resin, it's untrue. But even if we don't, even if Sisters of Battle is the next big project, I feel a lot more confident that everything else will get the attention it deserves sooner rather than later, based off what we've had over the last couple of weeks. The question is, what do you think? Do you think I'm reading too much into this, or do you think this does actually bode quite well for stuff that isn't Imperium or Sigmar based? Do you think it actually could be a sign that things are changing a little bit, that we are going to see a bit more attention and care given to the more neglected sides of both ranges? Be interested to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, please feel free to click the videos, Patreon, subscribe, all of that shit that's on the screen in front of you. Click it if you like, don't click if you don't want to, and I will see you for the next video. Toodaloo.